Hey everybody, I'm Eboni K. Williams along with Kat Timpf and Eric Bolling. 5 o'clock will never be the same. We are the Fox News Specialist. Let's meet today's specialist. He is the president of the Government Accountability Institute, author of the best-selling book, Clinton Cash, The Untold Story of How and Why Foreign Governments and Businesses Helped Make Bill and Hillary Rich. He is also the Breitbart News senior editor-at-large, and he specializes in gun collecting. Peter Schweizer is here. He is the chair of the Medical Ethics and Health Policy at the University of Pennsylvania. He is a member of the Council of Foreign Relations and is known as the chief architect behind Obamacare, but he specializes in being a chef. Dr. Ezekiel Emanuel is here. Well, okay, so Doc, I have to ask your favorite dish to cook?
Well, I have a raspberry rhubarb crostata, which I like at the end of a meal.
I think I just got hungry.
Ask Peter what his favorite gun to shoot is.
Yes, and likewise.
I want to know.
I like shooting lots of guns. I'm actually right now applying to the federal government to get a permit for a fully automatic machine gun. So if that comes through 6 or 7 months, come on down and we'll have a shoot at the
Absolutely not.
Oh boy, I don't know. I don't think I would handle that well.
Yeah. Machine gun.
I got a nice 45 that I absolutely
terrific.
I fall down the stairs too much for that.
Machine gun and raspberry desserts. I think we've got a nice combo here. So let's get started with the day's top story. Leaks and unmasking in the spotlight during yet another key Senate hearing today. This time, NSA Director Mike Rogers was on the hot seat, facing off with senators over illegal leaks and their role in the controversy around former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn.
Somebody took that information that we gained through collection with Flynn and gave it to the Washington Post.
Somehow it got to the media. That's clearly
That is a crime.
and that's a leak, and that is illegal. Yes, sir.
Okay. Are you concerned about people taking the law in their own hands, no matter how noble they think the event may be?
Oh, yes, sir. Which is why I've gone to my workforce in writing and said, let's make sure we understand what the professional ethos of our organization is. We do not, if I could finish, sir, we do not engage in this behavior. And if I catch you engaging in this behavior, I will hold you criminally liable.
Admiral Rogers also faced tough questions over surveillance and the reported unmasking of Trump campaign members by the Obama administration officials.
Is there a record of every request made?
Yes.
So there's a record of who made the request to unmask the conversation involving the American citizen?
Yes, sir.
There's a record of whether or not you granted it?
Yes, sir.
Is there a record of what the person did with the information once they got it?
No.
Do you know if Susan Rice ever asked for an American citizen to be unmasked?
I'd have to pull the data, sir. I apologize.
Okay, Peter, I'm going to start with you. We saw Senator Graham there, reiterating a lot of his concerns from yesterday, and I feel pretty confident he's going to get to that list. He's very, very concerned with that, who these people were, what they asked, and if they were permitted to ask it. But also, a senator we didn't see in that clip, but Senator John McCain, he had some very pointed questions today on these issues, particularly the worst-case scenario, how bad this thing can get. And he spoke specifically, Peter, around going from just extrapolating this info to actually manipulating it. How concerned are you around that escalation?
I'm very concerned. I'm concerned at both sides of this. I've always said from the beginning that these Russia issues ought to be investigated. However, I think it needs to be a more broad investigation, not just the Trump team. This effort that the Russians have had to try to manipulate or steer elections has gone on for quite a while. So I think you need to look at the commercial ties of Carter Page. You also need to look at the commercial ties of people around Hillary Clinton when she was Secretary of State who had commercial deals with the Russians.
Excuse me, let's be quite clear. It's the people around Trump who've had all the connections to the Russians.
No, not
Flynn talked to them, lied about it, and he was left at the National Security Administration for 18 days. He was in the Situation Room, in talking with Vladimir Putin, in talking with Prime Minister of Japan, Abe, and the Trump administration did nothing about it.
Yeah, but there's the reports that Russia's doing this with other countries now, too, so it shouldn't be about whether to take down... It shouldn't be about whether to take down Trump or whether to support Trump. It should be about protecting ourselves as a country from this influence.
The Trump administration had 18 days of information that Flynn was lied to them about talking to the Russians, that Flynn could be easily compromised by the Russians and was still allowed to be there and be in the situation without classified information. That
and
is
I don't think anybody's defending.
Yeah, nobody's defending that.
Right?
But here's the problem, and I agree with you completely that needed to be dealt with. But here's the problem:
it hasn't been dealt with.
It is being dealt with right now. There's an investigation going on. What's not been investigated is when Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State, her husband was taking large speaking fees from Kremlin-backed banks. John Podesta, who was advising her, was on the board of a small energy company that received $1 billion investment from a government investment fund run by Vladimir Putin.
You have Trump's campaign manager on the payroll of the Russians.
And he was fired. He was not on the payroll of the Russians.
He
certainly was.
Certainly,
no, he was not.
We're hearing this exaggerated partisan thing, but what's really up here?
So here's a couple of things. I mean, you aptly point out that Lindsey Graham, Senator Lindsey Graham, led this subcommittee, judicial subcommittee. I have a real problem with what Lindsey Graham did. And you're right, Peter. What he did was he brought Sally Yates, who was fired. She was summarily fired after 10 days of acting attorney general by the Trump administration. And James Clapper, who lied, who willingly and knowingly, admittedly, lied to a Senate panel years ago about whether the NSA was spying on Americans. So he gave them this huge platform to state their case. Yes, they got questioned. My question is this. Where was the other side? Where was the extensive interview of the Clinton...
Senator Cruz.
How about this?
They look very similar, yes.
And they may be just as off balance.
Points out that John McCain was asking questions as well. John McCain and Lindsey Graham have been never Trumpers. John McCain wrote an op-ed yesterday.
They voted with the president every time.
It's the State Department, Rex Tillerson's State Department. Here's the question. Why do you on the left always have a problem with what the real issue here, the only law that has been broken by any measure so far that we've learned, any measure, is the actual leaking of Michael Flynn's name to the Washington Post.
No, that's not the only. Excuse me.
Yes, it is.
You're the lying.
Everything else is being investigated and or summarily
here we have Flynn.
Found is not
here we have Flynn who lied to the vice president. Here we had Flynn who actually met with the Russians, and he was allowed to stay in the administration for 18 days after they knew that he had lied to them and been to the administration.
They were notified, but they didn't know. The FBI didn't tell them.
And the Russians could easily have turned him because they have information that he lied. And that is the most dangerous thing.
Listen, I totally respect
having a mole from the Russians in the White House is the most dangerous thing.
You do realize that every U.S. senator, whether Republican or Democrat, will meet with the same people that Michael Flynn met with, right?
I want to speak from a legal standpoint. One second, Doc.
Look, the Russians had blackmail information on him that he lied to the president.
Like saying every senator is able to be blackmailed.
Gentlemen, you know what?
You think every senator has blackmail information?
Yeah, I kind of do.
Actually, here's the thing, guys. We can debate this all day long. To your point, E, about what crimes are afoot legally. No, actually, we don't know that yet, E. We don't know that yet. We don't actually know. No. We don't definitively know if Michael Flynn will not.
Flynn to the Washington
We know
Post.
that is true, but we don't know that that's the only one. We don't know that Michael Flynn's not going to come up on criminal charges.
Michael Flynn also testified that he didn't meet with the Russians, and that is illegal.
And and he's out, and he should be out. And I don't think anyone's defending that. I think that we should wait, and we should all be on the same side of figuring out what happened, because this all affects us as Americans. It's politicized on one way or the other, whether it's pro-Trump or anti-Trump. I don't have a horse in the race. I'm independent politically. I just don't understand why it has to be so political when it's something that affects all of us.
Here's the issue. The issue is this just about General Flynn? Or is this about, which is what everybody says it's about, investigating Russian influence on American political figures in the election?
Peter,
if it's the latter, we should look at all instances where that might have occurred, not just General Flynn. That's all I'm calling for. And I don't understand why the resistance, if we're going to look at Donald Trump's commercial ties to Russia, if we're going to look at those of his campaign manager, why are we not going to look at those as it relates to the Clintons?
It's also the case of when the president knew about General Flynn and what did the president
do about it. Yeah, but again, are you not interested?
They didn't immediately fired him. Suggests that there's some compromising information that
we don't know that. We're not interested in the larger question.
Dr. Emanuel, what do you have? What's the there's been no evidence of collusion whatsoever.
We don't know yet.
He wasn't
we
fired.
Don't know yet.
Hold on, guys. He was not fired for colluding with the Russians. He was fired for lying to the vice president.
But that doesn't necessarily mean that he didn't do that. We don't know that yet. But let me get in right here. Peter, you make an excellent point. That's one of my questions. What we also know on both sides of this is there was actual intelligence from the NSA that there was Russian interference going back to at least 2015. Yep. So let's talk about that, Doc. Why are we just now hearing about this kind of coming out of this election when there was actual knowledge, real actual knowledge around this going back to 2015? Why are we just now hearing that?
I don't know the answer to that question, but the fact of the matter is that, you know, President Obama put sanctions on the Russians for this meddling in our democracy, and President Trump wants to take them off. That's what they were discussing.
Doesn't you not knowing the answer to that question, doesn't that bother you?
I think it's a
Doesn't
problem.
that bother you?
Well, it's a problem for me.
The thing that bothers me the most is someone who the Russians have some information on and can blackmail in the White House, in the Situation Room. That is having a mole as close to the president.
You can be bothered by more than one thing. I do it every day.
President Obama vetted Michael Flynn, kept him vetted, kept him with the highest security clearance in 2015 when he was meeting and doing speeches for RT, and still you're going to blame Trump for an 18-day window and yet not blame Obama for more than a year.
He's the national security advisor.
More than a year.
He's the national security advisor. He has access to more information than anyone else. He's in the Situation Room. He's in the. Look, those are totally different things. You haven't been in the White House. In the Situation Room, being a national security advisor.
Gentlemen and Kat, we've got to go, but I promise we will get back to this. I think when it comes to Michael Flynn, there's plenty of blame to go around. One of our specialists was the architect of Obamacare, and the other one thinks that the GOP's plan doesn't go far enough to repeal it. As the bill heads to the Senate, we'll debate its fate with our specialist up next. And make sure also to follow us on social media at Specialist FNC on both Twitter and Facebook.
The left has been in hysterics for days over the passage of the House health care bill, and as the legislation heads to the Senate, liberals are trying to dupe Americans into thinking a GOP overhaul would lead to an epic disaster for the health care system, as if Obamacare hasn't already smashed into an iceberg. No offense, Doc. But what the left doesn't want you to know is that the Senate will likely improve this bill, taking the necessary time and action to ensure more affordable and more access to health care for all Americans. Here's Speaker Paul Ryan defending his signature legislation earlier today on Fox and Friends.
The legislation should not take that long. Hopefully it takes a month or two to get it through the Senate.
Oh, really? You think it'll happen by the fall?
Hopefully it takes, hopefully it takes a month or two, because we need to give people the ability to plan. The insurers are pulling out very, very quickly, and we need to show the insurers that there's a better system coming. Stay in the market.
Now, Dr. Emanuel, I'd like to highlight your distinguished academic career and credentials. Amherst University undergraduate, Oxford University, Harvard Medical School, where you got your MD, Harvard PhD in political philosophy.
Build them up before you cut them down.
I want you to know I did my homework for you. I knew you were coming out.
How many books? How many books?
I'm not sure. Here's my question. Do you agree Obamacare is failing?
No. Obamacare actually has been more successful than anyone thought. 22 million people covered. Healthcare costs have actually flattened out. There's been a slower rise in premiums than under the Bush administration. Under the Bush administration, employer premiums went up 80% in his 8 years. Under the Obama administration, they went up 35%. Quality is improving. There's no effect on employment.
Doctor?
Medicare trust fund is extended for 9 years.
I have pages and pages of this, so I'm going to just give you two real quick ones. Premiums for mid-level benchmark plan and healthcare.gov states were up by an average of 25% in 2017 alone. Blue Cross, Blue Shield just warned that the affordable care marketplaces are in their early stages of a death spiral.
So
let's
go to what you said. The two things you said. First of all, both the Congressional Budget Office and Standard & Poor's evaluated the exchanges and said they're stable, they're going to go on. And by the way, there are some things, 3 or 4 things the Republicans could do that would stabilize the marketplace. Enforce the mandate, give the cost-sharing subsidies, and reinsurance.
I want to get
it. They don't like it when they pay the penalty cap.
Yeah, exactly. The mandate's not an incentive, or more people wouldn't be. They'd be buying it instead of going to the penalty.
Hang on, guys. Peter, you're in Virginia, live in Virginia?
I live in Florida.
Okay, in Florida. 50% rate increase for Maryland, 35% rate increase for Northern Virginia, 29% increase for District of Columbia next year alone.
Yeah. Now, I told a friend I was going to come on and talk with Zeke about health care, and he said that's like playing a pickup basketball game with LeBron in terms of knowledge. All I'll say is, if you lose Bill Clinton, I think the war is lost. Bill Clinton said last fall that Obamacare is crazy. And what he basically
he did not say that.
He did say that.
No. Crazy system. Crazy system.
Yes, crazy system. He said, and the example he used is a guy that works 60 hours, has seen his deductible go way up, and has seen the costs go way up. And my point is simply, look, the system is not working. People know it's not working. The problem that I have with the reform bill right now is it's essentially saying we're going to be half pregnant. I think we've got a fundamental choice right now. We either continue down this direction that we're going of greater government state intrusion, or we decide we're going to have a free market-oriented healthcare system. That's the fundamental choice.
Under Obamacare, what happens? People go to a marketplace, they choose which insurance company they want, private insurance, and they get subsidized for it. That's the free market at its best.
If they have
government subsidies are not the free market, by the way.
That's the bet. You cannot afford health insurance without the government subsidizing it. Right now, the average family premium in the employer-sponsored marketplace is $18,000. That is not because of Obamacare. That's because of
deductible on that? What's the deductible on that, sir?
In employer-sponsored insurance, it's pretty low. It's probably $500.
Let me get in here, though.
Wait. I mean, this was supposed to cover non-employer-sponsored people, right?
I'm telling you that it's expensive. And the reason it's expensive is underlying health care costs, not Obamacare. And that in Obamacare, it is the free market, allowing people to choose which insurance company they want.
Let me bring these two guys.
That is the free market.
Ebony, you remember when they were selling Obamacare, they said we're going to bend the cost curve down?
Yes.
They haven't bent anything down. The cost curve has done nothing but skyrocket.
You're absolutely wrong.
It was actually directed to me, right? Let me get in
That is a matter of fact that is incorrect. We have kept healthcare insurance,
I can't address it.
Healthcare costs under control for the last 5 years. As a matter of fact,
17 they skyrocketed, 18 they're going to be worse.
That's premiums. That's not healthcare costs.
Oh, you know what? You can't play right.
I'm not playing with the game. You're misquoting things.
Okay, I'm going to actually speak from my personal experience for the second doc. Please, thank you. You asked a question. I would like nothing more than healthcare to come down in this country as someone who for a very long time now has paid for it myself. Subsidies are fine. You know, the only problem I have with them, doctor, is that they do not benefit the young and healthy among us. You know what? We end up paying significantly more. It becomes unaffordable for us. So I have done for many years now, I have paid the penalty because that makes more sense to me. It is more affordable for me to pay out of pocket. I'm just going to be straight up with you. You might not like it. It doesn't sound so PC, but it's the truth. When I do the math, a $700 a month premium makes no sense for me. I want to make another point. Peter, you talked about being half pregnant. I'm going to use that to segue to a problem I have with the reconstruction so far with the Senate. Why is it 13 men? And I don't just mean optically from some gender-based talking point. I mean politically. Because what we're setting up here is going to be an echo chamber, possibly around this bill, where you've got strong Republican women in states like Maine and West Virginia who are going to politically be able to say, I didn't get my say in what this should look like, and they might be those two votes that are going to make this thing be vetoed.
There are so many problems with the Republicans' version of the bill. I'm not defending that one at all. I think that some of the things that are problems with Obamacare, I agree with you, could be made even worse. Like we were just talking about the individual mandate, not really enough of an incentive for a lot of people, particularly young and healthy people, to go buy insurance. And the Republicans' replacement is, hey, if you're out of the market, when you go into the market, we'll charge you more. That's a reverse incentive. So I don't see premiums going down under this current plan.
You know, I was just in Montana fly fishing, and my guide said to me, you know, before Obamacare, I was paying $600 for a family per month for a family premium. Now under Obamacare, he's paying $45 a month. And his wife got treated for breast cancer.
Well, we're not
everybody had that experience.
We're not
exactly.
Had that experience. It depends how much you earn. That's the subsidies depend upon a sliding scale.
Let me give Peter a word here before we go. Peter, a lot of this stuff, a lot of these increase in premiums and deductibles hits in 17 and 18. Aetna's saying that they're down to just from 15 states down to 4. 18 of 23 healthcare exchanges have gone belly up.
Yeah, that's right.
No, they have not.
I mean,
the exchanges have not gone
belly up. And just because you have health insurance doesn't mean you're getting the best health care. There's a difference.
You've got to be very careful about what you speak about, and you haven't been careful at all.
18 of 23 healthcare co-ops established by Obamacare
have failed. You said exchanges. The exchanges are not failing. The exchanges are very stable according to Standards & Poor and the Congressional Budget Office.
Death spiral. Death spiral according to Blue Cross Blue Shield.
Problems in Obamacare,
no,
and not even point anything out.
I can tell you what the problems are.
Okay.
We didn't do enough on cost control. We have to do more on cost control.
I say less on cost control.
Let me just say something. The Speaker Ryan's plan, There is not a word in the bill about cost control. Not one word about cost control.
I'm not impressed with Speaker Ryan's plan for the record.
Here's a fundamental reality. I'm not a healthcare policy expert, but I know a little bit about economics. And here's the reality of economics. In any sort of situation that you have a scarce good or service, you're going to have two things happen. You're either going to have rationing by price, in that the prices are going to be high and it's going to be difficult for some people to afford, or you're going to have rationing by a government bureaucrat. And that's why I think you have the problem with sort of being half pregnant is we're going to face a choice. I think Charles Krauthammer's right. In 7 years, we're either going to have to move to some sort of single-payer system, which I know you have not really been in favor of in the past, or we're going to have to fundamentally change the system. You can't do this halfway. And I think if you give people a choice of paying high health care costs and having that be a barrier, or having a government bureaucrat like you have in the UK saying we're going to pick and choose who gets service when. I mean, they've got 18-week waiting lists now for major surgeries in the UK, and the British Health Medical Association has said
there's no waiting list in the Netherlands. There's no waiting list in Switzerland. There's no waiting list.
We are
in
nothing like Switzerland.
Every
you
other
can't
country.
compare this to Switzerland.
I would like. You want a free market?
Why?
You want a free market? Right now, the average cost per American is $10,000. American families cannot afford $40,000 to cover themselves under the free market approach.
This is not a free market approach. We've never had a free market. We've never had a free market.
When you get the architect, you get a couple people who are in love with the bill. All right, let's leave a law, I guess. All right, a preemptive strike against Texas's sanctuary cities by the state's attorney general. Could their days finally be numbered? Don't mess with Texas. We'll be right back.
Texas is tightening its squeeze on sanctuary cities after a big sanctuary crackdown became state law this weekend. Ken Paxton, Texas's attorney general, is now filing a preemptive lawsuit against Austin and other sanctuary locations. He explained why earlier today.
We had heard that they were not going to comply. We'd also heard about some other entities that were not going to comply. So instead of waiting for multiple lawsuits around the state and dealing with this over a long period of time, we decided, let's get this on. We believe our law is constitutional, and we're ready to go. This similar law was passed in Arizona, was upheld by the U.S. Supreme Court, and so why wait?
All right, Eric, I'm assuming you like this, right? You're a fan of this?
Well, here's what I'm a fan of. I'm a fan of state law, of pushing it to the states. And if the governor of the state says, we are going to uphold federal law, then guess what?
Sure.
But law enforcement is there to enforce the law that they're told to enforce, and this is one.
No cities in this state were listed by the Justice Department as lacking in compliance, so that's why I'm just wondering.
Well,
it seems like a political posturing to me.
We're going to continue our sanctuary
They weren't
policy.
listed as non-compliant.
Here's the bottom line. Trump is the wall. 70% reduction in border crossings. But as he points out very aptly and very importantly, that the reason why a wall needs to go up is for not only just illegals coming across, it's for human trafficking. It's one of his biggest pet peeves. People are coming over.
It's more than a pet peeve of mine. I'm anti-human trafficking.
No, but women are being sold into human trafficking. It's god-awful, and that's why the wall needs to go up. As far as sanctuary cities goes, look, you don't like it in Texas, you don't like your governor, either vote for someone else or go to California or Washington State where the sanctuary policy is alive and kicking.
Doc, you look like you want to jump in.
Well, I'm mystified by this because, as I understand it, that law doesn't go into effect until September 1st. So how can you begin to prosecute cities for not enforcing the law that doesn't actually go into effect? And as you point out, these cities haven't been cited as being non-compliant with the federal government. So, I mean, I think the Attorney General just wants headlines here. It's not clear that there's any violation of any law.
Eboni, you want to answer his question?
I will answer your question, Doc. So you actually can, and it's not entirely uncommon to have these type of what we call preemptive litigation efforts, trying to get in front of it, trying to anticipate for political or other reasons why some people might not comply. My issue, though, is this, Kat, just from a legal nuanced place. He talks about the constitutionality, the AG here. It's actually going to be in question, not because of necessarily the lettering of the law, because he's right. Law enforcement is to enforce the laws. But there's a clause in this ban, right, that talks about how law enforcement can just ask for papers, so to speak, ask for immigration papers. And when you put that into practice, that can oftentimes look discriminatory, because sometimes what you have the situation where the probable cause to stop you is just off the color of your skin. And if it starts to go that way, as some people said it did in Arizona, they're going to have constitutional challenges on their hands.
Right. And how would it not go that way, though? I don't think they would ask me for my papers if I were out there. I think that that would be a real concern.
Of course, it's going to be constitutional.
But I think, again, there's a fundamental question here, and I'd be interested to know, what Zeke's thought is on this. I mean, do you agree that if the federal government has certain immigration laws, that whether cities agree with them or not, they should enforce them? Wouldn't you agree with that? That the federal law should trump it?
The local police, right, their main concern is they want to have a safe community.
I understand that.
And principle number 2 in a safe community is you need good community policing.
So
there's no good, let me just finish it. There's no good relationship between the community and the police department. You will have a lot more crime, and people won't be reporting crime. And what Austin is concerned about is exactly this, that they go out and they're papering everyone, and the immigrant community is not going to participate, and crime's going to become much worse, and they're going to have unsolved
It's important to know that there is an exception in here for people who are witnesses to crimes or people who are reporting a crime. They're not included. But the community may not perceive it that way, but it is important to note that there is that exception.
And the sheriff has spoken out about this. Her name is Sally Hernandez. She's the Travis County, kind of the Austin area sheriff. And she said, look, I don't like it. I don't agree with it. I do have those community concerns that Zeke is talking about, but ultimately I will enforce it as law. That's
and we as conservatives, or myself as a conservative, have to applaud what's going on in the state of Texas. They're saying we will uphold federal law. Now look, California has blanketly said we're not going to push sanctuary on anyone. We're not going to push anti-sanctuary on any one of our communities. Fine, that's fine. And again, that's why elections have consequences on straight down to the governor level. Your governor is your CEO of your state. Your governor makes that call. You don't make that call as mayor of Austin, Texas.
No, do you really want to say on the left that local officials now can decide optionally whether they're going to enforce federal law?
They can't constitutionally. They can't be.
That's my point. That's my point.
Exactly.
That's exactly right.
All local officials have said if the federal government gives us a warrant or a reason to that this person is suspected of committing a crime, we're going to turn that person over.
Well, the crime is being illegal.
No, what they want them to do is
they've committed the crime.
No,
they came here illegally.
No,
that's not really the issue in this particular case. We're talking about sometimes there are just traffic violations, but we have to move on.
This is the issue. If they're going to violate,
we have to move on. All right, fighting in Afghanistan is escalating as President Trump could send now at least 3,000 more troops to the region. Is it the right strategy to defeat the Taliban? Don't go away.
Welcome back to the Fox News Specialists. Our specialists today are Peter Schweizer and Dr. Emanuel. Now, let's continue the conversation. President Trump considering a major troop surge in Afghanistan. A Pentagon plan under review would send up to 5,000 more U.S. troops into the fight with ISIS and the Taliban. The White House explained the potential strategy shift this afternoon.
One of the things that he has asked his national security team to do is to actually rethink the strategy. What are we doing to achieve the goals that you were asking about? How do we actually, how do we win? How do we eliminate the threat? Looking at the mission and the strategy, and that's what the team has been doing holistically, not just in Afghanistan, but the total beyond Afghanistan. It's also the way that he's asking them to look at the threat that ISIS poses.
Spicer was also asked if this would mark a broader change in President Trump's foreign policy beliefs.
I think that his priorities remain the same, but he's going to do what he can to make sure that he protects the country and our people and threats that directly affect the United States.
All right, Peter, this is one of the things as a conservative, small government conservative, maybe a touch of libertarianism in me. I don't like this idea. I mean, look, I agree that President Obama probably declared mission accomplished too soon, and Afghanistan is still a problem, but I don't like sending more troops. No more Americans.
Yeah, there's not any great choices here, honestly. I mean, we kind of had them on the ropes in 2010. They've resurged, the Taliban has. And here's really the issue. The issue is, do we just not do anything in Afghanistan and risk having a situation we had with bin Laden where terrorist groups create training grounds and they use that to launch sophisticated attacks on the West? Or do we try to at least keep them off balance? And I think that's what the strategy is. This is not a surge designed to try to achieve victory, because I think they recognize the American people don't want to send 100,000 troops to Afghanistan. But on the other hand, I think if you leave Afghanistan alone, you risk a terrorist organization get a large territory where they can do the kind of training and planning that leads to sophisticated attacks in the United States. I don't think we have a choice.
Dr. Emanuel, a lot of this could be blamed on Barack Obama, who declared victory in 2014, said this is over, and it's clearly not over. The Taliban is live and kicking, as is ISIS.
Let's see. It was George Bush who invaded Afghanistan, and
yeah, but he didn't end the war. Obama ended the war in 14.
Look. And President Trump in 2011 said, let's pull the troops out as soon as possible. And he was all for pulling the troops out. You know, my perspective is Afghanistan has defeated many other countries. Britain in the 19th century, the Russians. We've been there for 15 years. It's not a good investment. And the question is 5,000 troops going to make a difference? We had way more troops there, and I seriously doubt 5,000 troops are going to make a difference, even with the change strategy.
Right. Well, Condoleezza Rice asked that question. What is the strategy? What is the point? You're just adding more troops. Is there any change strategy? Like I said, 15 years, hundreds upon hundreds of billions of dollars. And it's not that simple. Trump says he wants to do this so he can do more winning. But this isn't like laser tag where you have the red team and the blue team. And if you're on the red team, then you should have to hit the blue team as many times as possible, then you win. It's so much more complicated. There's people who are on our side and then there are enemies. And there's people who are enemies, but they're fighting our other enemies. And then we'll unseat certain leaders and then new problems arise.
Right.
It's so much more complicated. And we've been throwing so many resources at this and getting nothing in return. So why are we throwing more resources at it?
$2.5 trillion, 2,300 lives lost. I mean, is it time to just let them be them?
Yeah, for me, I appreciate the strategy and the thought behind it, but we've put 100,000 troops on the ground in the Obama administration. We saw no real return on that. Peter, when you talk about your son reporting in just a matter of days to serve this country, I would want that investment to be something worthwhile, something that we get a real return off of. And I'm not convinced, respectfully to President Trump, that this is going to bring us that. I don't see it. And when Condoleezza Rice talks about it, I'm asking those same questions.
Well, and I think those are fair questions to ask. I think also, though, you have to look at not only what troops you have there, but what is their mission, what are the rules of engagement, what's their purpose. Clearly, the strategy under Bush and Obama was essentially nation building and trying to bring the Taliban to the negotiating table. And the history of getting radical movements, whether Islamist or otherwise, to come to the negotiating table is extremely difficult.
Yes, but
the history of beating guerrillas is also not a very good record.
Correct.
And 5,000, I mean, here's the thing is, it feels, again, like it's, to borrow your phrase, half pregnant.
Yeah.
Okay? 5,000 troops are neither here nor there.
Right.
And that is, I think, a serious problem. Plus, we don't have a strategy. The president has never articulated
what was President Obama, Ezekiel, what was his strategy other than, I'm going to get us out of all our conflicts? And some would say way too early what he did in Iraq, and certainly now we're finding out way too early in Afghanistan.
No, I'm not sure I agree. It's way too early in Afghanistan. It's not clear that that there is a stragy to win in Afghanistan.
I mean, how long are we going to stay there before we admit, hey, maybe not? Why are we going to keep throwing more and more resources? We haven't accomplished anything.
But here's the question. Do we really want to create a circumstance where in Afghanistan you have terrorist groups that are creating the infrastructure that allow them to, God forbid, conduct another 9/11 in the United States?
But Peter,
that's the cost. That's the cost.
But Peter, do these 5,000 troops give us a different
result?
That
I don't know.
That's my question.
I don't know. But that's a very fair question to ask. Yes.
And then what do we do? We stay there for how long do we stay there then? How long do we stay there and keep sending more troops?
There's no good
10 more years, 15 more years, 20 more years, forever? How long?
There's no great choices here. There's no great choices.
But wait a second. Should we be spending money there and getting nothing for it? That's what we've been doing. It's talk about pouring money down a rat.
We have some breaking news right now. Producers in my ear. We're not going to take this commercial break. James Comey is resigning. Is that what you're telling me?
What?
Oh, wow.
James Comey has just announced he's going to step down as the head of the FBI. Peter, I'll bring you in on this. He's been under a lot of scrutiny, back and forth with the Clintons, with Hillary Clinton's emails and whatnot. They're blaming, the left will blame Comey for Trump's win. Your thoughts on Comey backing down now?
Well, I have a sense that this is probably based on his testimony, where apparently he made a statement that was not accurate. Whether it was an intentional lie or slip of the tongue, who knows? But it basically came out that he claimed, I think it was thousands of emails that Abedin had forwarded to her husband, and that is apparently not correct. I think it's maybe a dozen or 6 or whatever it is. So I think it's grounds to step down. Look, he had a very, very difficult job. I personally think that he should have been much more robust in investigating the Clinton emails, and he should have at least convened a grand jury to let voters decide. I also think, from my experience, there was investigation of the Clinton Foundation, but there was a lot of resistance from the top. So I think it was a good idea for him to resign, but it's a very difficult job for anybody to step into at this point.
Doc, in my recollection, I can't remember a director of the FBI, or frankly, any of the intel services, having such a high profile, high broadcast profile as James Comey?
I don't know. J. Edgar Hoover had a very high profile.
Okay.
But beyond that, the fact is that this is a guy who violated the rules inside the FBI and the Justice Department by announcing an investigation 11 days before an election and potentially.
That's not what he did.
Yes, he
No,
did.
He didn't
and
announce,
potentially throwing the election. The polling is pretty clear on that. And
this is important, guys. I'll let you finish, but we're just being told now. Sean Spicer has just told the press that the president has accepted the Attorney General's recommendation to dismiss James Comey. Go ahead. Your thoughts now. They're a little different than he resigned.
Right.
He's been dismissed.
Right. I don't know what he thinks James Comey is doing then.
Well, I'll say this. I'll say this. I think that I've talked on this program a lot about restoring credibility to our government agencies, particularly as an attorney, the Department of Justice. I think this is an important first step. I defended James Comey for a long time through this election. And ultimately, with what Peter talked about today, those misstatements of facts, whether intentional or not, the sloppiness of the investigation with Hillary, just all of it, it's a mess. This will go a long way in rehabbing the credibility of the DOJ.
Let me get Kat to weigh in here.
Right. I mean, nobody trusts the DOJ right now. Every time someone says something, they misspoke. They misspoke. I don't trust anybody except for my dad at this point. I watch these hearings and I say, well, do you really think so? And I don't think, Doc, I got to say, you're saying that this goes back to him announcing the investigation. I don't think that had much to do with it. What else was he supposed to do? Because him not announcing that would have been a politically motivated decision.
You're not supposed to say anything in the last 2 months before the election. That's a long-standing rule at the Justice Department.
No, here's the problem. Here's the problem. A week before, he had testified on Capitol Hill under oath, and he made the statement that there was no ongoing investigation on email. It was over. New information presented himself. At that point, he was in a situation where he was either, in effect, lying to Congress or not giving them the full information. He had no alternative, really, other than to inform the committee, which is what he did. It was not an announcement of the investigation. It was clearing up his testimony.
Talk about leaks. Everyone knows that making an announcement to the Senate and releasing the letter is going to happen.
He would have faced legal jeopardy.
The fact of the matter is there is a long-standing rule, no public comments on ongoing investigations or new investigations in the last 2 months before the election after Labor Day.
Can we also talk?
This is well known that he violated that norm of the Justice Department.
And can we also talk about, I mean, there was a lot of discussion of whether or not James Comey has lost the trust of his investigators. He has literally thousands of investigators working for him. And at one point during the election, they were saying, we're telling you one thing, and you're saying another thing. Specifically, they were telling James Comey that they found enough to indict Hillary Clinton, and he recommended no indictment.
And that's why I think this is a good move, because if you're an attorney and you're working for the DOJ as an assistant U.S. attorney, this is a problem because you don't feel respected by your boss. You don't feel like your input is being valued and demonstrated around. And that's what I'm saying. Depending on who he's replaced with, I will give you that, Zeke, for sure. This is an important way by regaining credibility because I don't think anyone on any side of the political aisle or within the DOJ was very excited about him.
And with the American people, too, it takes a look like, okay, you can just say anything and get away with it. You can break as many rules as you want and get away with it. Especially in the DOJ, we're seeing, I feel that way, and I think most people do.
Let me just read it very quickly, and I'm quoting Ed Henry just emailed us. Quote, today, this is Sean Spicer. Quote, today, President Donald J. Trump informed FBI Director James Comey that he has been terminated and removed from office.
This is ahead of he usually has a 10-year period so that it's not a political office. That's the attempt. So this is way ahead, and this is a political move. I think the real question is who he replaces him with, and is he an individual above reproach and with a huge amount of integrity? And I think that's going to be a real test for the independence of the FBI.
Well, you know, who does he bring in, Peter? I mean, now you have the Attorney General talking about bringing someone in. Remember, the FBI director works for the Attorney General. Who do they bring in? They bring in someone hire from within, or they bring someone out from the outside who they have confidence.
I'll do it.
I think Zeke's right. You want to have somebody that's independent, somebody that's respected. But this is in a sense a thankless job. Look, I mean, you're stepping into a circumstance where there are a number of investigations going on that are very sensitive, very difficult. It's not an easy task to take. I'm hopeful that they're going to make a very good choice, and let's hope it's somebody that comes in that handles some of these matters better than Comey did. There was clumsiness in the manner in which he handled things. Then he would try to correct the record in some way, and more confusion ensued. And I think this testimony was sort of the final statement. I mean, look, we understand if you're going to make a misstatement, but making a misstatement that somebody forwarded thousands of emails.
And it was systematic. It was systematic behavior, which it was.
Exactly. I mean, that's a huge mistake to make.
Yeah. But I think the real test here is, are they going to get someone who's non-political and not partisan and has a very strong reputation for integrity? I think those are the two criteria for the FBI.
No, Kat, it's actually not.
For the FBI.
It's actually not, and I hope that they hire an internal candidate. Here's why: because there are a lot of really good men and women that work for the DOJ. There are assistant U.S. attorneys. They take pride in what they do. They want to restore the credibility to that office, and they are above politics, and they don't appreciate that their office has become a political mechanism.
Mark Knoller, a longtime White House follower reporter, says, he just tweeted, White House says a search for a new FBI director will begin immediately. President Trump calls it, quote, a new beginning for our crown jewel of law enforcement. That's a very good point. And you just kind of hit on that. Yeah. I mean, it is our chief investigative body in America. Very, very important who
the highest brow
is. And respected. I mean, that was a big thing, Peter. You remember during this whole Hillary Clinton email scandal, the agents in the field just lost faith in their leader.
No, that's exactly right. And think of the reversal that took place here. I mean, when Jim Comey was appointed, everybody was saying this is the guy that's sort of straight arrow.
Everybody liked him.
And as the investigation with Hillary Clinton was going on, you had the Democrats that were saying that this is terrible. And then when he came out and said he was not going to charge, they all thought he was great. And among conservatives, it was kind of a similar reversal in the other way. So. Look, I think Comey had a difficult time, but he clearly was not up to the task in the way a lot of people thought that he would be.
So I would say I think I have two criteria for replacement. The person has to have a long-standing record of high integrity, and the person has to be nonpartisan. I think you do not want to get a partisan person in that job.
Agreed.
And I think the president has to stick to those two criteria. And if we don't get those two criteria, I think it'll be a sad day for the country.
Do you think Comey was partisan or nonpartisan?
When he came in, he's a Republican. He was appointed by a Democrat.
I'm asking you, was he
appointed by a Democrat.
Liberals loved him, and then they hated him.
Right. He made everybody angry.
The problem is the problem was he offended everyone on both sides, and he did things which looked very partisan, like making an announcement to the public 11 days before an election.
Senator Lindsey Graham just tweeted, quote, given the recent controversy surrounding the director, I believe a fresh start will serve the FBI and the nation well. Kat.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think there needs to be a fresh start. I don't know how much good this will do in terms of people distrust the office now. I think it's been so bad that people distrust the office. There's going to have to be somebody who's going to be very clearly not partisan and without any speckle of suspicion. That's going to be difficult. That's going to be really difficult.
I think the point you make, Kat, is very important. We've had a long decline in our trust in institutions.
Correct.
And this country needs to regain trust in institutions.
Yes.
And I think that actually should be our chief concern here. Does the person bring the kind of credentials to it that is going to restore the trust of the American people in the institution of the FBI and in other government agencies? I think this actually is a big problem, because what we're seeing is an attempt to destroy and undermine a lot of allegiance to institutions.
More than an attempt, Zeke. I think it's been pretty successful.
I have a letter, guys. This very quickly. This just came over the wires. Dear Director Comey, this is from President Trump. Dear Director Comey, I've received the attached letters from the Attorney General and Deputy Attorney General of the United States recommending your dismissal as the Director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. I've accepted the recommendation, and you are hereby terminated and removed from office effective immediately. This is big stuff, you guys. While I greatly appreciate you informing me on these separate occasions that I am not under investigation, I nevertheless concur with the judgment of the Department of Justice that you are not able to effectively lead the Bureau. Let me repeat that you are not able to effectively lead the Bureau. It is essential that we find new leadership for the FBI that restores public trust and confidence in its vital law enforcement mission. I wish you the best of luck in your future endeavors. Now, let me ask you this. He points out, Donald Trump, president, that he's not under investigation.
Yeah, I mean,
and this had nothing to do.
He had to get that in there. He had to get that in there.
You don't want it to look like you're dismissing the director of the FBI because you're under investigation. You want someone else to lead an investigation into your own.
The first 100 days of your administration, it's a little sad if people think you're under investigation. That's a very bad comment on the current situation.
Well, he couldn't say no. Remember, he couldn't say no in his testimony a couple of weeks ago.
That's right. So I think he put it in there, E, for probably a couple of different reasons. But ultimately, I will say I think it's probably one of the best decisions I've seen from President Trump. We absolutely have to start over. I am horrified by the sacrifice of credibility in some of these departments, intelligence agencies, DOJ, and State Department. Here's to a new day and a new start.
Yeah, I'll say based on my personal experience, Clinton Cash came out in 2015. I had a lot of meetings with FBI people as far as their investigation was concerned. The people that I dealt with at the FBI are all very professional. They're all very gung-ho in a good way. I mean, they want to do the right thing, whoever it is they're investigating, whether it's the President of the United States, whether it's Secretary of State, or whether it's a clerk that has committed a violation of crime. And I think a lot of sort of the parsing and the maneuvering that took place under Jim Comey frustrated a lot of people out in the field.
Allow me to break in you guys into the discussion. We have Katherine Timpf on Capitol Hill, not at the White House, but Katherine, first of all, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can. Thank you.
Okay, Katherine, just give us the latest. What do you hear?
Okay, so I just got off the phone with a former senior FBI official who said to me that he had been sharing some texts with people inside the Bureau this afternoon, and there was no indication at the Bureau, and he believes to Director Comey that he was going to be fired this afternoon by the President. He indicated that if Comey had had a heads up, it would have been telegraphed in some way internally, and he would have taken the opportunity to tell the FBI workforce first, but that apparently was not the case. I'm struck by this letter that has now been released by the White House to Director Comey, and there are several things here that jump out at me. One is that the decision, according to the letter, to fire the FBI director was based on letters that are attached here from the Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, and the Deputy Attorney General, that they have recommended they've recommended for Comey's dismissal as the director of the FBI on the basis that he cannot effectively lead the organization. What I would say, as means of a backstory, is that there has been a sense among career FBI agents that the director had effectively boxed himself in. He had created a lot of enemies on the Democratic side and then also on the Republican side. The Republican side for not pursuing criminal charges against Hillary Clinton for the mishandling of classified information in the lead up to the presidential election, and then also on the Democratic side for not being forthcoming last year about the existence of a counterintelligence investigation that was being run by the FBI into alleged contacts between members of the Trump team and also Moscow. So we have confirmation from the White House that the FBI director was fired by the president at the recommendation of his Attorney General and the Deputy Attorney General, and that is effective immediately. And based on my reporting, there was no indication at the Bureau today that that was going to go down. Back to you.
All right, Katherine, thank you very much from Capitol Hill. All right, very quickly, Sean Spicer was about 40 minutes late to that press briefing today. I wonder if they were talking about that.
He had some stuff going on.
Well, no, if this leaked, how do you answer something like that?
Right. Well, that's right. And I think this experience also shows the tremendous confidence President Trump is putting in the Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, because the Attorney General writes this letter, and it sounds like it was a pretty quick decision. There was not a lot of deliberation based on this. It shows a lot of confidence in Senator Jeff Sessions, the new Attorney General.
At least from my time in the White House, those kind of decisions would have been much more taken more time and been much more thoroughly investigated before it happened.
Which led to me.
And the question of whether the president is making too many rash decisions and just immediately.
Well,
but I do think
his Attorney General and Deputy Attorney General.
And I don't know that it's rash. I don't know that this wasn't a long time
coming.
coming. Exactly. I think this has been a long time coming.
On a thought there.
Yeah, there's nothing. I don't think I disagree with the fact that this is a rash decision. Just because we're hearing about it all of a sudden doesn't mean that it was made all of a sudden.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you to our specialists. Brett Baer, special reports coming up next with some massive, massive breaking news. As we just said, FBI Director James Comey has been fired by the Trump administration. Take it away, Brett.